mention on him. Did you, by any chance, we'll have to cut this. You know what? I'll talk after. I can talk after. Let's just say this. Go to his Instagram profile and William and take a look. Okay. There we go.
I did see that. It's a bold move.
Okay. Very bold. Very, very bold. Okay. That's it. That's all I'm going to say.
Go Big 12 or go home. I'm Brandon Shanahan, joined as always by Midwest broadcasting legend Drew Russell. Drew Russell, we're here. What a week. We're finally in the thick of conference play. If you're listening to my voice or watching my face right now, just hit the subscribe or the like button. Do both. It doesn't hurt you. Helps the economy. Helps us out a ton. So we can keep providing daily content without and also comments. It doesn't even have to be something nice. YouTube doesn't know the difference between a mean comment and a nice comment. So if you don't like something, tell us, and it helps us out anyways. But what a weekend! How you doing, Drew Russell?
Where's the standard of mean that you'd be like, okay, that's enough. That's too mean for me, because you have pretty thick skin. I'd say thick skin too. What's that comment that makes you say, okay, that's too much? That's too far.
Well, I think there's certainly a line to be crossed. I don't think I would put out any material that I wouldn't be wouldn't feel fine being targeted against. Like anything within the podcast, that's absolutely fair game. If you're having to do your own research, then that's probably past the line. But if it's for the betterment of the channel, lay it on me. I'll deal with it. I'll be sad. I mean, my feelings will be hurt, but also if it means that we get a boost in the algorithm, the ends justify the means.
See, I've already been in enough pain this year because I've been stopped twice in an airport with an Iowa State shirt on, saying we love Caitlin Clark, and that hurts.
I've had that one time at McDonald's. The manager came up, said, "Is that where Caitlin Clark wins?" I'm like, I never want to eat here again. Boy,
yeah, just terrible.
I can't believe that happens on a regular basis.
Oh, it happens too much, Brandon. It is the absolute worst. It really is. I can't take it. And again, I have so much respect for what she's done. Obviously, I think we're just not even going to touch that discourse. We're talking about football today, even though that's a very big story, once again, with the WNBA and all the chaos regarding that right now. But yes, that hurts. You can offend me on that one, Brandon. If you see me with an Iowa State shirt on and you tell me Caitlin Clark, yeah, we love Caitlin Clark. You can get me on that one.
Yeah, that one would keep me up. But we could do a Caitlin Clark rookie year recap since her season is done as it always has been before the championship rings are handed out. So, yeah, whatever. I mean, my one big takeaway with her leaving Iowa is I'm so happy that we get to see her in the WNBA so we can keep seeing her not win championships. So that's been cool. So we're already getting a taste of that into the thick of it. So that's cool. But we're in conference play, and boy, what a chaotic week it was. Boy, just so much fun. We'll dive into each individual game, of course, as always. But what are you thinking as far as just a whole now that we're heading into October?
We don't know what's going on. 16 teams. It feels pretty wide open, this conference race right now. Our three top teams going into this season, based on our preseason rankings, all have at least one loss, if not two, if you're Oklahoma State. Utah, pretty shocking loss to a Arizona team that, again, you and I have a ton of respect for. Noah Fafita, McMillan, that in offense, that defense, though, has been getting wrecked, but they took advantage of Cam Rising, and took advantage of the little Wilson and picked up a huge win. Kansas State's already lost. BYU's undefeated in conference play. I don't know what's going on anymore. Colorado looked great yesterday. So I don't
very
know.
unfortunate.
Oh, you and I both got hammered on confidence rankings on UCF. That's and I still won't rip you, Gustavo. I won't rip Gustavo. He's probably earned it a little bit, but just I don't know. There's no as we go into October, the Big 12 is the most chaotic conference in college football right now. I'm not saying it's the best. I understand that. But it's the most chaotic, and I'll make a strong argument it's the most fun.
Yeah, and it's so funny to me because at the beginning of the year, we're like, yeah, it is the most open, it is the most chaotic, it is arguably the most fun and exciting conference in football, top to bottom. But yet here we are, September 29th, and it somehow feels even more wide open than we would have given it credit for. Because if the season were to end today, it's Iowa State and BYU in Arlington. Now that what a world that would be. Obviously,
That'd be an insane world.
A lot's going to happen between now and then. Almost certainly will not be the exact combination of Iowa State and BYU as it currently stands. But my gosh, what we're a month into the season now. I mean, we're not. It's not like one or two flukes here and there. Like this is, we're in the thick of it now.
I mean, BYU were looking at, hey, we just hope this team maybe can make a bowl game, and shoot, they're top 25.
Yeah,
and playing some really good football. And they almost lost their lead yesterday against Baylor.
almost.
But they hung on and found almost is the key word, but they found a way to get it done. And Iowa State, it wasn't pretty offensively for a healthy chunk of that game. But my goodness, they got it going late in the third into the fourth quarter. Abu Sama, one of the better touchdown calls I've heard as well by Eric Collins. That was really well done, where he just screamed, Abu Sama. That was a great call. That usually don't see that type of energy. It was terrific. They find a way to get it done as well. We don't know what's going on with Kansas. We thought Kansas might have a breakout season, might get some good crowds at Arrowhead Stadium. Saw those photos yesterday. Brutal. It's wide open, Brandon. 16 teams. They used to have the 10 teams, one true champion. Obviously, it's not round robin anymore, but if you're looking for mayhem like Allstate, you're getting it right now.
And real quick, recording this on Sunday, of course, so the AP poll just dropped. I've still got BYU in there at 17, Iowa State at 16, Kansas State still in there, Utah in there at 18. Any crazy Big 12 thoughts that this feels appropriate? I don't really have any notes here.
I don't either right now, Brandon. I think fair rankings. Unfortunately, as much as I want to put an undefeated Iowa State or BYU in the top 15 or even the top 10, like other undefeated teams in the SEC, Big 10, and ACC, Big 12 is still trying to get that identity put together in this new era. So I think the rankings are very fair right now. I think for the conference going forward, again, it's guaranteed the conference champion in Dallas is going to get a first round bye. That is confirmed. And that's big. That's a huge incentive that you're guaranteed a quarterfinal appearance. I've seen some complaining on Twitter already about that. And I say, I don't care. That's how it was written. Everybody agreed to it. And I think Big 12 has earned that opportunity for that bye. But it will be interesting to see as things progress, as schedules continue to dictate. And I think October, the carnage continues. I just don't think things will, like Iowa State, BYU, if that is our matchup in December, you can come back to this clip right now and consider me shocked. Because I just think there's just too many twists and turns that we're not ready for yet.
And it's not even just that I don't think that Iowa State and BYU are good enough to make the Big 12 championship. It's just I know how chaotic this conference is, and I know at no point is the thing that should happen going to happen very easily. Some other notes: Arizona's right on the doorstep. They're the first team out of the rankings, receiving votes. Oklahoma State still received some votes despite their loss to Oklahoma State, and then Colorado picked up a vote here. I'm surprised they didn't make more noise, but so a couple other contenders as well, just knocking on the doorstep. Of course, the only conferences with more teams in the top 25, the Big Ten and the SEC. Not a whole lot of surprises there, and then of course they each have multiple top 10 teams. Just one thought outside of the Big 12, I really thought Georgia was going to be ranked higher. I would have thrown a fit about it, but 5 feels appropriate for them. But I thought they were going to really try to elevate Georgia because of their loss.
I did too, and it was a competitive loss at the end. They were not ready to go the first 20, 25 minutes of that football game, but the Dogs found a way to come back, even took the lead for one play, and Bama had an all-time moment. That was an all-time game.
That was an all-time moment for sure.
And you wonder why people can talk about the downfall of college sports and college football. No, it's alive and very, very well. And the SEC, shoot, a lot of prospective college students. In fact, I was just seeing a thing around Twitter, Wall Street Journal article this week. A lot of kids from the North are heading to the South. Northeast kids are going to schools in the South. And look, academically, I'd rather go to the Northeast or North or Midwest. But the South has college football, and they have wild tailgate game day scenes. And for an 18, 19-year-old, that's more fun than getting a good education. Everything regarding that game, you look at the atmosphere of that game, Alabama and Georgia. What an all-time atmosphere. What an all-time moment. Kalen DeBoer won't have yard signs of for sale, at least for this week, considering the demand of how tough it is to coach at Alabama following Nick Saban. And Bama got it done. They played a great first 25 minutes of the game. Georgia made a comeback, and I agree with you. I thought Georgia was still going to be higher, but they did lose last time I checked, and Texas did win. Tennessee won. Ohio State won. I think 5 is a fair ranking for Georgia, but what a moment. I mean, holy cow. Student section was insane. A lot of viral videos are going around, just the atmosphere there. Just reading an article this week, Wall Street Journal, a lot of kids in the Northeast, Midwest, moving south, going to colleges in the South. They care more about the party atmosphere, the social atmosphere of Southern public schools compared to more that academic run maybe in the Northeast. So people say college football dying. No, it is not. In fact, I'll make this argument, Brandon. I was talking to my cousin over the summer. He's in college. Kids are still using social media. They're still using phones. It's not bad, but they want more inhuman experiences. That is the first generation that's always seen somebody with a phone in their hands, no matter what. Like, you and I are old enough. There wasn't a phone in people's hands when I was a kid. That didn't really start for me until junior high range. For you, elementary, middle school too, in that range too. So it's just interesting. But to go back to the initial point, I like these rankings quite a bit. SEC well represented. The Big 12, I don't mind where they're at right now, but there is opportunity for growth even amongst just those 4 schools sitting between 16 and 20.
Great slate for the Big 12 this week. We'll get things started here with the early week game, BYU and Baylor. It looked like BYU was going to run Baylor out of the building and run Dave Aranda back to the unemployment line. They had a very respectable comeback effort. A little bit too short, but BYU hangs on. And, as we mentioned earlier, undefeated going into October, which was not something I would have even entertained going into the season.
No, and it's not like they played out of their minds. They did, I guess, the first 15, 20 minutes when you score on your first 4 possessions and take that big lead right off the bat. But they really did survive the last 35, 40 minutes. And right now, the name of the game, I just watched the Vikings barely eke out a victory over the Packers. It was a very ugly second half, but they survived, and the win is a win. And I don't think this Baylor team's that bad. Like, I know Coach Aranda, there's a lot of frustrated people that want him fired. I know Iowa State fans low-key were maybe expecting him to be fired today before their matchup this week. Like, I don't think he's doing a bad job. They're definitely better than last year. I mean, they got a fluke Hail Mary loss at Colorado, who looked a lot better than both of us thought they would be yesterday. And then on top of that, they could have easily won that game. But at the same time, football's not about those moral losses. That official win-loss record is what matters. And ultimately, they did fall in a home game in a one that many people thought they could win. So for Baylor, kind of a difficult loss, even though I think they are a lot better. And for BYU, they're doing just enough right now to keep winning and continue what has been a really impressive start to their 2024 season.
Yeah, I'm just curious to see what happens with this Baylor team, because we talked about it last week. That Colorado loss is so tough, and when you let a game like that slip through your fingers, it can really derail a season. And I don't think that's what's happened, and I don't think that's the explanation for the BYU loss. But you got to start; those wins have to start coming in, because that's what's been missing. Obviously, getting rid of Jeff Grimes coming into the season, a huge win. Just look at where he's at now in Kansas, and how they're doing offensively. Um, so there's that. I do think it would take a pretty remarkable turnaround for him to return to Waco next year. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's in such a chaotic spot where it's beneficial to let go of him before the season ends.
And I think his situation is very interesting compared to other college football coaches currently. Mike Norvell, boy, that man is going through some tough times at Florida State after a great season last year. They're 1-4, and SMU just took him to the woodshed. That might not just be a bad SMU team in the end, Brandon. We might just have underestimated the ponies out of Dallas. Like, that loss for TCU might not be as bad as we think. That remains to be seen, but they looked very good yesterday and did their job. We were just talking about Arkansas off the air. What's the future of Sam Pittman's job? The difference, like, I'll go with Arkansas and Sam Pittman. They've got a gauntlet of a schedule coming up. That they've got to play LSU. They got to play Texas. They got to play Mizzou. That's brutal. I mean, that's on paper a lot of losses on the way. For Baylor, they're still, I feel, some opportunities for them, Brandon, to go bowling. And yes, they do have a losing record, but I mean, I'm looking at their schedule. Iowa State's a very difficult one this week, and then at Texas Tech versus Oklahoma State. Those are three tough games. But then after that, versus TCU at West Virginia, at Houston versus Kansas. If they can survive October, if they can find a winning record in October, and that is asking a lot, I know that. But if they can still go bowling. But yesterday was a winnable game for them. They couldn't get it done. And for BYU, kudos to them being ready to play. They played a great first 20, 25 minutes, and that was the difference. Baylor wasn't ready to go.
Yeah, outside of Iowa State, Baylor definitely got that game is a lot more winnable for Baylor than I would have pegged it at the beginning of the season schedule, especially with Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, Kansas. West Virginia hasn't looked as good, so I mean, it's just you know what, that's a good benchmark, Dross. I think if they go 500, they get to a bowl game with that schedule down the stretch. I mean, those are some pretty good wins that you'd have to get to get there. I think that's a good benchmark. I don't know if it's enough, but that would be impressive.
I think so too. And for Baylor and for BYU, I mean, let's give them credit. The statistical, I still wish they had more of a running game, Brandon. They just don't. They don't really have even any like hyper dangerous passing weapons outside of, Darius Lasser had a good game yesterday of 8-120 and a touchdown. But their defense, I mean, they made plays yesterday. They were able to force a couple of interceptions off Robertson. That was big. So they're doing just enough to win. If they make the Big 12 title game, That's incredible.
That's
I still have my
unbelievable.
doubts a little bit. I still have my doubts. I won't lie, but they're doing their job right now and they're undefeated. So I can only tip my cap.
Up next, Kansas State and Oklahoma State, probably the biggest game that we thought coming into the season, both a ranked matchup. And Kansas State really just kind of dominated. And I think I finally figured out Avery Johnson. Because at the beginning of the year, it looked like he was going to be the future of Kansas State football as the quarterback, going to be the best quarterback we've ever seen at Kansas State. And then those first few games, I didn't love what I saw from him throwing the football. But I think I figured out the best way to describe him is that Avery Johnson is a very good football player. And
Hmm.
that's enough. I don't think he's a great quarterback, but he's a ball player. I mean, kind of Johnny Manziel kind of had the same shtick where like what people saw in him that made them think that he was a first round draft pick talent quarterback is beyond me. But dude's a football player. He wins games, he makes plays, and that's what Avery Johnson does, and he did plenty of in the Little Apple against Oklahoma State, as they picked up a real big and convincing win.
I'm going to start with Oklahoma State, Brandon. Man, what a disappointment. I think starting defensively, they gave up huge chunks of yardage for certain plays yesterday. Gave up a defensive touchdown on a bad turnover offensively. Um, Offensive line, I think, has been very disappointing. One of the shocking stats, Ollie Gordon's only had one 100-plus yard rushing game this season. That was week 1 against South Dakota State. He only has 3 total touchdowns this year and only 1 since week 1. He hasn't had any the last 3 weeks, which to me is crazy considering the talent that Gordon has. Like, we're both young enough to remember him just ripping apart Oklahoma last year. Like, this is a gifted young man. So for Oklahoma State, very disappointing. Alan Bowman, I mean, he's at Brandon Whedon's age. 2 tough turnovers, barely over 50% completion percentage. Tough loss for the Cowboys. And on the other side for Kansas State, this was a get-right game for one of these 2 teams, Brandon. Both were coming off of losses. And K-State, I thought, faced a little adversity, midway through the second quarter, but they were able to clean it up. And you mentioned Johnson. He was absolutely, he did his job yesterday. DJ Giddens had 187 yards rushing. So offense was good. Defense was opportunistic, forcing multiple turnovers. That really turned out it wasn't even that close of a game. I don't even know if that score properly indicated how much better Kansas State was.
Up next, probably yeah, I'll say the most surprising game of the week in Disney World, Colorado, as double touchdown underdogs took it to UCF. It blew them out, dominant all the way through. Seems like they found a run game, which I didn't think was possible to just stumble upon in the last week of September like they did. Travis Hunter continues to be phenomenal. Boy, yeah, the Buffs. And another thing I realized this weekend is I have never had a good beat on the Buffs. I thought that they were going to be improved going into last year. I was right, and then they come in and beat TCU. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking that I wasn't right. I wasn't high enough on them. And then they start off 3-0, I believe, and then they come back down to earth. Once I finally catch up, I'm like, yeah, this is a bold team. They're going to win 7-8 games. And then the wheels fall off, and I'm like, nope, I was wrong again. This team stinks. This team wasn't built for this. And then going into this year, I'm like, they can't. Their offensive line can't be as bad. And then the first few weeks they come out the exact same team. I was wrong then, and I'm like, okay, yeah, so this team actually stinks again. This team's gonna stink again. It's the same team as last year, um, but stinky. And then I'm wrong again, I guess. So I'm just done trying to figure out what Colorado is. I'm just here for the ride.
Colorado. I First off, let's strike our Heisman poses, Brandon, because Travis Hunter struck one after his touchdown yesterday. Which, you know what, I liked it. I liked that he had the guts to do that in September. He's had a great start to the season, so that was pretty cool. We don't know on Colorado anymore. we're done trying to figure out Colorado. Shadur Sanders had a great game yesterday. His weapons continue to be good. You mentioned the running game. They didn't have any runners, Brandon, over 50 yards, but they weren't. They didn't. They were more of a neutral at running game yesterday, which is good. That's a win for that program. If they're not getting enough yardage, then like that's when it becomes a loss for them. And what I mean by that is like Mike Leach at Texas Tech or Washington State or Mississippi State. His offenses were famous: pass first, pass, 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 pass. Sometimes they'd run though. They weren't expecting explosive running plays, but if they could get a running back just to get 3, 4, 5 yards, that was a good running play for them. They don't need explosive running plays. They just need productive running plays. They got that yesterday. And for UCF, boy, the bounce house was going yesterday initially. Really good energy. But multiple turnovers from KJ Jefferson. Defense didn't have a good showing in the secondary, and that's more just Colorado has a lot of talent at the wide receiver position, and they have a QB who can get them the ball. But I mean, they were outrushed for a good chunk of that game, and UCF's a run-first team many times, so that has to be disappointing for them. I thought it was a real opportunity for them yesterday. They were double-figure point favorites at home, so Vegas also misread this game completely. I think everybody did, and Colorado proved quite a few people wrong, and they sure looked like a bowl team, Brandon. Shoot, if they play like that, they might even get a decent bowl.
Yeah, and I've seen with the topsy-turviness of this league, I mean, I've seen some folks jockeying that they could be in like that second tier in the Big 12 as far as like they could go on a run and make the conference championship.
Yeah.
To me, that doesn't feel right, but I just like I started the segment on I've been wrong about Colorado every step of the way. So maybe they do make a run to Arlington. That'd be crazy.
There's no reason why they can't, Brandon. I mean, they are undefeated. I mean, we talk about BYU and Iowa State being undefeated in conference play. Like, Colorado is too. And they've got a big one coming up. They'll have the bye week coming up this week. I think a good time for their bye week. Then they welcome Kansas State in on the 12th of October. And that's a big game for them at home. If they can win that game, Brandon, boy, that schedule is not bad. They have to go to Arizona, but Cincinnati at home, Tech on the road, Utah at home, at Kansas versus Oklahoma State. It's not a gimme schedule. Pretty intriguing games. Doesn't mean they can't win them, though. I mean, every one of those games is winnable, and that's the Big 12 this year. You have a chance to really go on a run if you want it.
TCU and Kansas, our big swing game. Really the only game all year that we've really disagreed on, and admittedly, neither of us really felt good about either team. We didn't know what stadium they were going to play in until the game started because contracts weren't signed as of Friday nights. But TCU takes it to Kansas. Huge bounce back win for TCU. I think the season's officially dead for Kansas.
I'm going to go on a quick rant on the Kansas administration. And I guess to a lesser extent, the Hunt family and Arrowhead, but that's not their job necessarily. How on earth do you not have that agreement in place? That should be done months out. Like, how do you wait till that late to say, okay, we're good to play college football or football here? That's absolutely inexcusable. And Kansas, look, they did have to do a stadium renovation project. I'm not denying that. They could have also just built a new stadium too and just played at their old one for a couple more years, or did what Northwestern did. Northwestern, shoot, they're completely building a new stadium. And they just say, you know what, we got this practice field that doesn't seat a lot of people, but it's right off Lake Michigan. It's nice. And they've renovated into a not a huge home field advantage, but it does feel like home, and it is on their campus. And granted, as an outsider, I love the concept of college football being played at Arrowhead Stadium because it is a great stadium. Sorry, Brandon, I know how you feel about the Chiefs. But it is a great stadium, and it's a great place to watch a football game, and I don't blame Kansas for making that decision for a couple of seasons. The problem is the administration didn't think ahead, Brandon. They didn't think ahead, and that's to me inexcusable. And for Lance Leipold and that team, that can't be fun thinking throughout the week. And we knew it probably was going to get done. But why should that ever even be a story? That is just inexcusable. So shame on the Kansas administration. I think that did play a factor on Saturday. There's no excuse playing the way they did. And I'll quickly to give TCU that proper credit. After a tough loss in a rivalry game against a team they do not like out of Dallas and the Ponies last week in SMU, they come right back and put together really a nice road victory. They proved me completely wrong. I thought Kansas would protect their home field. Then again, though, Brandon, I was operating under the assumption as well that, they weren't in limbo on where they were going to play too. So maybe I'll give myself a little bit of a break.
Yeah, that's such a weird spot to be in. I mean, I got to imagine. I would have imagined something would have been signed before they even announced this, let alone we're 24 hours to game time. But outstanding stuff for TCU. I'm trying. There we go. Jalen Daniels, 5 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 53% completion percentage, averaging 161 yards a game. Boy, there's been a lot of talk in the college football space about NIL and values and maximizing your value. It feels like Jalen Daniels, his best days are behind him. That's an awful place to be for a guy that was widely expected to be one of the top quarterbacks in the Big 12. He's been bad.
He hasn't been great. His Kansas team has lost by 1 possession in 3 of their 4 losses. TCU, and in that TCU game, it's not like they weren't uncompetitive for most of that game. They were right there towards the last 5 minutes or so. And QB play, I think, has played a factor. Mistakes played a factor. Obviously, 8 interceptions just cannot happen from the quarterback position through that month of September. And defensively, I don't even think the defense has been bad, but boy, it's just been the timing of some of the plays they've given up that's been more painful for them. To have that big lead at West Virginia and just not be able to get enough stops at the end is tough. Illinois was a very winnable game, and that's an Illinois team that, was competitive enough against Penn State, even though it didn't feel like they had a shot in the end. But what a disappointing year for Lance Leipold and company. Lance Leipold's still a good football coach. I don't care. I know they're 1-4. He is a good football coach. I still think they have the right staff in place. The fact that we're talking about how stunned we are, Kansas is 1-4, instead of being, that's just how it is because it's Kansas. That shows how far they've come. But boy, it feels like they did not cross enough T's and dot enough I's before the season.
And what I keep coming back to is this felt like a ceiling year for Kansas. It felt like, all right, we're going to see what Kansas can achieve. They got their senior quarterback back. So far, he's been healthy. That's always been the question mark. You got Lance Leipold, who's got a whole roster full of his guys now. I mean, there's no inheriting any of this roster anymore. We're going to see what Kansas can do. And they've taken a huge step back. And it's very, very troublesome because they don't recruit that well. So once Jalen Daniels does leave, how does it get better? I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel here.
I don't either, Brandon. I think for Kansas, again, you got to keep grinding. You got to hope that you find some better turnouts. And I'm not blaming the Kansas fan base necessarily. They didn't have a great turnout at Arrowhead Stadium yesterday. Granted, that's a huge stadium. That would not be outside of Kansas, Mizzou. I don't think they're going to sell out Arrowhead, even though Iowa State fans, I'm sure, are determined
they'll push
to make a run in November. And don't get me wrong, Colorado, I think, could make a pretty decent run, at least filling up that stadium a little bit. But there's still a good amount of season to go. 1-4. We'll see how they bounce back. But what a disappointing month of September to go winless. Where on paper, frankly, I thought those numbers would be flipped. I really thought they'd be 4-1 around this time. And I put them in our second tier in preseason with kind of Iowa State. Them and Iowa State I kind of lumped together because I liked the potential of this team. but I really underestimated, I think, the fact of just the weirdness of the stadium situation, their inability to execute down the stretch, I think, has been the number one story so far, though.
And our Cyclones, they're back. They won a very ugly kind of rock fight with Houston. It was 3-0 at halftime. And in the past, this kind of feels like the exact kind of game where Utah stumbles upon their shoes, and finds a way to keep Houston in it and lose. But shout out to the Cyclones. Their defense was phenomenal, of course, putting up a bagel. Um, it's that's huge. I know there's certain fan bases on the eastern side of the Cyclone State that were bumping their chest that they shut out like an Illinois State team or an FCS team earlier in the year. Doing that to a Big 12 team, a Power 5 team is impressive nonetheless. Uh, but a gritty win. Abu is back. First 100-yard game, first touchdown scored for him on the year. Happy to see him back, and just very pleased with Jalen Jackson. I didn't think that he would be as big of a problem as he's been for defenses. 96
Yeah.
yards on his own chagrin, and boy, when you have somebody who's taking care of the football and being efficient like Rocco Becht has been, having a 1-2 punch in the backfield is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, and Jeremiah Cooper and Jontez Williams both picking up interceptions as well. First 4-0 start since the year 2000 for Iowa State, Brandon.
Wow.
So it's been a minute since they've gotten out to kind of a quality start like this. And you're right, yeah, kind of similar to BYU, and granted, the game was pretty much decided midway through the fourth quarter following that Sama run. It felt like, okay, we got a ball game here. But it wasn't pretty, but a win's a win, and the defense was outstanding. I still like how this defense is playing for Houston. I want to give Houston's defense a lot of credit. I thought they played a really good football game. Rocco Becht didn't look comfortable at times. Maybe they overlooked him a little bit that first half. They kind of drove down the field pretty easily, put up a field goal. I think they thought, okay, we're going to cruise to victory. Houston's defense woke up and played a really good first half. Limited explosive plays outside that Sama run, too. So I want to give them a lot of credit, but their offense just clearly still a work in progress. And Iowa State's defense took full advantage of that work in progress. It was a terrific any road victory in this conference is a good win. I'll take it. I don't care where you are in the standings. So you win a road game in this conference, and TCU as well. I don't know if we gave TCU enough credit. Just going to Arrowhead off a loss and picking up a road victory in this conference, it's good to see. So for Iowa State, much deserved victory, and put themselves in a good position with some nice home games coming up.
Sneaky, one of the most fun Big 12 games on the slate. It was on ESPN Plus, so I don't think a lot of people saw it. But Cincinnati and Texas Tech really went at it, trading blows the entire game. Texas Tech rallies late and pulls out the narrow win. We talked about Cincinnati kind of coming into the season, and we talked about hope. You know, you just got to show me something. I was very disappointed with them last year, but boy, there's a lot of hope going on, and a lot of that has to do with Brendan Sorsby. He's been fantastic. The sophomore coming in, 4 touchdowns against Texas Tech, 426 yards. He's been outstanding. 12 touchdowns to 1 interception on the year. They're not fine. They're still a step away from figuring out how to win these games. But boy, there's a lot of hope there, and that's exactly what we were looking for out of the Satterfield administration.
Yeah, I got to say Cincinnati I thought looked great offensively. And compared to where they were a year ago, where I remember watching them against Iowa State, and it was unwatchable offense for Cincinnati. So they've made some great positive steps offensively, and usually 41's been enough for their defense to do enough to get stopped. They just couldn't handle the brilliance of Taj Brooks. 172 yards, Brandon. Really was just nasty throughout the game. And, you know, the Tech defense was able to do just enough. They get an interception. They get a fumble recovery. Cincy, though, is definitely taking those right steps. They have to be pleased. I hate moral victories, but they do have to be, I think, happy with where the offense is going. And these are watchable games for them. And for Texas Tech, Jiminy, Brandon, this team, we talk about potential contenders in October and November. Like,
They're
why not
4-1.
the Red Raiders right now? They're 4-1. And I mean, this the narrative will continue. We are, though. I mean, they took care of their business against, I think, an improved Arizona State team, against an improved Cincy team. I know they got waxed against Washington at Washington State, but it'll be interesting at Arizona this upcoming week, which I think will tell us a lot where Texas Tech's at, considering Arizona just picked up a pretty emotional victory. We'll get to that in a minute against Utah. So I don't know, Brendan, but gosh darn it, Texas Tech is doing it again. They're reeling me back in. I hate it, and I know I'm going to get burned eventually, but they're winning. We'll see how they do this week, but great win for them.
Oh, man, this is the game I was looking forward to the most about talking about. Utah getting beat up by Arizona. You hear all the chatter on Twitter about how Utah begrudgingly went to the Big 12 to come in, by their time till the Big 10 calls. Talk about they're going to run the conference because they have a couple of nice Rose Bowl losses on their resume. And then turns out they're not even the best team coming over from the Pac-12. Unbelievable stuff. I saw somebody talking about Cam Rising, calling him Scam Rising. That's the best thing I've seen. The hate Twitter lap was doing very late, and early this morning, gave me so much joy. And I gave them a very favorable analogy a couple of weeks ago where I talked about them being like Denver Broncos fans, where you get overlooked for so long, or not Denver Broncos fans. Denver Broncos stink. The Denver Nuggets, where you're like banging the table, like, no, Nikola Jokic is actually awesome. And then he finally gets his flowers, finally gets starts winning MVPs. Then you're like, no, this is actually a championship caliber team if everybody just stays healthy and stays on two legs, and then everybody stays on their two legs and they win a championship. But that's the part. And so I gave them the benefit of the doubt. You got to win the championship to get those kind of accolades. And I know Cam Rising also, I just got to say this, he's got to be the number one quarterback of all time as far as game time decisions. It was a game time decision basically the first month of the season last year. He suited up. He was warming up in the Florida game at the start of the season. He didn't play a single snap last year. Then he runs into a cooler in the Baylor game. And then ever since then, it's been, well, it's a game time decision. He suited up last night. And then they still threw Isaac Wilson out to the Wolves time in and time out. I mean, what are we talking about here? Cam Rising gets no more benefit of the doubt for me. Utah gets no more benefit of the doubt. That was a tough loss for a team who's got a fan base that's done a lot of talking and talking down on the beloved Big 12 conference.
Yeah, and their fan base is quick to turn on just their own quick too. I mean, I saw some tough, as you said, Brandon, some tough conversations just at their own players. So kind of scary stuff right there. I want to give you Arizona a lot of credit. I didn't like their odds going into this game. I just haven't seen much of them on the road. They proved me wrong. And Fafita hung in there in the pocket. I think the most defining moment for me, Utah scores early in the fourth quarter. I think the crowd's like, okay, we're going to stop. Get Isaac Wilson the ball back. We can do something with it. And Fafita just chucked a couple of bombs down the field, and that, the big one to Burnett for 35 for the touchdown. I mean, it felt like ball game, weirdly. Like, I thought, if Utah can keep them to 16, it's done. Or I thought they could score one more time. And once he hit that ball, I think it's done. Their defense was great. Maybe Utah's offense just a little bit inept compared to years past. That remains to be seen. I won't judge them fully on one game. But yeah, it does feel good. And I know Big 12 fan bases have had a good time kind of uniting as a front, going after the Utah fan base, considering how much maybe they've chatted a little bit. They're still a good football team, Brandon. They're still top 20 for a reason. I still think they could end up with double-figure wins. It wouldn't shock me if they're in the conference championship game. But guess what? Their buffer zone's gone. It is no longer existent for Utah. They lose one more time. I don't think a two-loss team will make the Big 12 championship game. I'd be actually shocked at this juncture. And I look at their schedule, it's still pretty favorable considering. I mean, their road games, Brandon, not easy, but at Arizona State, at Houston, at Colorado, at UCF. Home games against TCU, BYU, Iowa State. Those three home games are actually all rather tricky. And every one of them, considering the different styles of those teams. But yeah, that buffer zone they wanted, it is gone. And we'll see how many bids Big 12 gets. I'm still hoping they can be a 2-bid league, maybe 3 if we're going nuts, but I'm going to guess 2 at most. You lose twice, I just don't see it. I think you have to make a conference championship game to be viewed as net large.
I think so too. One loss team. I guess in Utah's defense here, I think you go to the committee and plead. And this is all pending if Cam Rising ever plays football again, which I'm not sure of. I'm not sure he comes back this year. I saw the same, rigmarole last year. So he might. But if he comes back and he plays great and then they win all their games, I think, and don't win the Big 12 championship game. Because now they don't have that tiebreaker with Arizona. And refresh my memory, who did Arizona? Oh, Arizona lost to Kansas State. So there's a realm where if Kansas State wins out and then Arizona wins out, Utah can still go 11-1 and not make the conference championship. I think that's still a very solid case, especially when you can go to the committee and be like, our quarterback was injured. Evidently, you guys view that very heavily, whether or not you have your starting quarterback or not, or maybe that's just an ACC thing. Didn't seem to much matter when Ohio State was on the third quarterback. But I think that's a very good case that you can make. Again, I don't think that Kansas State and Arizona will necessarily run the table the rest of the way, but there's a path for it.
There is, but it's a path that it has a few more vines in there, a few more alligators in there, sharks, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to throw out there. But for them, it's more tough. But for Arizona, yeah, they have that loss against Kansas State, Brandon. But I think they reminded people, and they were going through the graphics during the game, all these players that decided to come back to Arizona despite their coach leaving. This seems like a group that is very unified, likes being together on and off the field. I'm not saying it'll even happen going into next year. I know NIL has just made things chaos. And we have UNLV quarterbacks quitting, and then their backups seem to be better than them, which is very funny. But, I mean, Arizona's a tough team. And it might be just how good they are, but it shows anything can happen. I mean, the way Kansas State beat Arizona, I thought, K-State, Brandon's prediction of an undefeated season looks pretty good, and then they go to BYU and lose. Utah looked like a cream of the crop team in the conference. They look pretty weak on Saturday night at home. Anything can happen. I've said that 20 times already, but I will continue to harp on it because it's true. It's what makes this conference so enthralling.